Headlines on WLIW, our opportunity to sit down each week with the award-winning journalists who cover the East End, do a bit of a deeper dive into the week's headlines. I'm Joe Shaw. I'm the executive editor of the Express News Group. We publish the Southampton Press, the East Hampton Press, the Sag Harbor Express, the website 27east.com, and Express Magazine. My co-host is Bill Sutton. He's the managing editor of the Express News Group. Hey, Bill.
Hello, Joe. Hello, everybody.
Thanks for being here. We have our usual panel here with Beth Young, who's the editor of the East End Beacon. Hey, Beth.
Hello.
We have Denise Civiletti, who's the editor of Riverhead Local. Hey, Denise.
How you doing?
And our guest this week is Cailin Riley, who's a staff writer for us at the Express News Group. Hey, Cailin.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
Thanks for being here. Let's start in Riverhead. Denise, you've got some news about the big town square development up your way. What's going on? What's the update?
Well, at the last town board meeting, the Riverhead Town Board took a resolution off the floor. That is, it wasn't in the packet or anything like that. It was never discussed. Authorizing what's called a prepossession agreement and authorizing demolition of the building at 127 East Main where that place Crafted was, which they got possession of the premises there by eminent domain, you recall, probably. That means they forced the guy out. And they are in a contract to sell this building to a developer in town that's done a lot of work in town. One of the people that built the aquarium and the hotel, Hyatt Place, and he's done some restoration work on very old and formerly decrepit buildings. But he is going to tear it down and build a 5-story hotel with the top floor, I believe, is going to be condominiums. And
is that bigger than what's there now?
Oh, yeah. So what's there now is a 2-story building.
I see.
There are a lot of people that are opposed to these 5-story buildings in general, and that one in particular because they're saying that it's going to overwhelm the town square. It's going to be like a big looming thing. So there's a lot of conflicting opinion about that. But
is that really out of character for that part of Riverhead now? There's a lot of multi-story buildings in that area, right?
Well, I mean, not really yet. There's one and one under construction, but there are more planned, several more planned. But in any event, so they pulled this resolution off the floor, and it was, in addition to authorizing this prepossession agreement, it authorized the demolition of this building. And the supervisor said it was tentatively scheduled to take place on Thursday, but I think because of the weather, probably, I haven't heard that it's happening, so we're talking right now on Thursdays. I don't know. There was just a whole lot of hoopla at the meeting because this one man was arguing with the town board and they were arguing back with him. And then in the end, 2 days later, they spent 20 minutes of their work session talking about how I reported it incorrectly, that they didn't authorize demolishing the building.
Don't you love that? Oh,
yeah. I mean, I didn't go to that work session because there wasn't really anything on the agenda, but then they added this to it. But I wrote a little column about that because they gaslight the public a lot. If they do something that gets people's knickers in a twist, they basically just say, "Oh, that isn't what we did."
Yeah, we had that happen this week as well too. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be happening more frequently lately that people are calling out reporting and suggesting that the reporting has things wrong when I don't know that that's... Why
would they want to backtrack on that, though, Denise? Why?
I don't know. I think people got on their case about it, maybe. I really don't know. But it's obviously what they did. I mean, I wrote in this column, I laid it all out, what the resolution said and the agreement that the resolution authorized. It was basically all about the demolition of this building. The prepossession agreement was, maybe a little in the weeds, but they are essentially shaving portions of a couple of other town-owned parcels off of where they are now and putting them onto this parcel that they're selling to this developer in order for him to build the building that he wants to build. So they're going to need time to do that, to do those lot line adjustments. So they had worked out in the master developer agreement that at his request, they would enter into this pre-possession agreement to allow him to demolish the building and get the site ready for construction, you know. I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently like wrong with that personally, but I think the fact that they didn't discuss it at the work session when it wasn't in the resolution packet, they pulled it off the floor, and and they did it in a way that was needlessly, I don't know.
Did any of the board members object to that? Because sometimes board members object to being sort of blindsided by stuff like that.
They weren't blindsided. They knew this was part of the plan, I think. They just didn't want to put it on the agenda, I don't think, because then they thought that would bring people in to engage. Imagine
that.
And they don't want that to happen. So they'd rather I guess they figured they could just slip it by people. I don't know. I don't know what they think half the time. I really don't. But in any event, that was, and we were expecting that this was going to be coming down, but we have had some nasty weather. So
you and Beth are kind of keeping an eye on this. I'm curious what you both think the general opinion from the public is about this whole idea of the town square project, and people have some objections to elements of it. Is there general support for what the town is doing, or is it kind of a controversial thing?
Well, I think the original proposal, it didn't include this hotel.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of public feedback. They gathered a lot of public feedback, and that was before. I think that was before the hotel was on the table. So adding this in just seems a little bit like a bait and switch to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, it's town-owned property. They tore down a bike shop that a lot of people liked in order to put the town square there. Now they're tearing down a bar that was very popular.
Very, very popular.
Yeah. So
and the craft shop that was there was very popular.
Crafted was the bar.
Crafted was I'm sorry, that was the bar.
Yeah, the bar. Yeah.
Apologies.
That's okay. But on the other hand,
there was some crafts going on there, Joe. But different kind of crafts.
Come down to Riverhead. It's not that far.
but yeah, a lot of local businesses, and I'm curious too. Are they making the argument that there's that much of a demand for hotel rooms in Riverhead? And I'm assuming the argument is that the aquarium and maybe the new science center that's going in might bring in more tourism dollars. Is that? I'm assuming that's the argument.
It's not just River. I mean, there are very, very few housing options on the North Fork, and a lot of people who come out for weddings at the vineyards end up staying at hotels in Riverhead because the cost of housing, the cost of hotel rooms on the North Fork is just absolutely insane. And if you're just a regular person just trying to go to a wedding for a friend and have to pay like $700 or $800 a night for a hotel room, it's asking a lot.
I mean, I was surprised just recently. A cousin of mine came to town to visit, and I was checking out hotel rooms for him, or telling him where to look or whatever. And I was surprised that they were, $350, $400 a night.
Yeah, that's the ones in Riverhead. Yeah, the
wow.
ones in the North Fork are like double that.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I mean, this developer is not. He developed the hotel, the Hyatt Place East End, and the Preston House, and I mean,
which are both right there. I mean, so you're adding a third one right in the same.
He still owns them and runs them, so I feel like he knows what the demand is. You know what I mean for hotel rooms, and I think that they always get hotel companies like he got Hyatt, right? And they wouldn't be able to do that if the market didn't support it. Mm-hmm. That's my feeling. I don't know. People, I think, liked the idea of opening up the river from Main Street,
Yeah, but that was, it was pitched originally, and as a Riverhead resident, what attracted me to the idea is that it was pitched as something for locals, for a Riverhead resident, that the town could have an event there. There could be, I mean, it's a town square
Hmm.
that there would be local events that I could go and do stuff with my neighbors and stuff. Not a big, a big tourist attraction, although that certainly can be part of it.
Well, I mean,
But
there's still gonna be like a plaza, the town square open
yeah,
space, so to speak, is still gonna be like a public space.
right.
Um, you know,
I've made,
so
I've made this point before though, and
I
it
don't
was
know.
more about the South Fork, but I know like in Southampton Town for years, the comprehensive plan in Southampton Town openly said we're discouraging day tripper uh, tourism. We don't want day tripper tourism. We don't want people to come out for the day. So we're not going to put a heavy emphasis on hotels, and that's not the economy we want. We want the part-time residents to be here. But it's interesting to me how things have evolved, and now with Airbnb and Verbo and all of those companies, I think I think both of the towns on the South Fork, whether they like it or not, are starting to have to adjust to a new reality, which is that there is a heavy economy for day trippers and for people who are just coming out for a couple of days at a time. I mean, it is the new
I
the new
think former
invasion that we get.
Supervisor Jay Schneiderman saw that and recognized that, although, I
He's a
think
hotelier too.
he's a motel owner in Montauk, which has a lot of motels. But I think that I think he recognized that for Southampton and talked about different proposals for boutique hotels that none of them materialized because I think a lot of residents still, aren't in favor of that. But it seems to me that if you have a tourism economy, you want people to come out and stay, right?
Well, I mean, no, there's no question that the Riverhead town is not discouraging day trippers at all. I
Yeah.
mean,
Hmm.
with the aquarium, with hopefully the science center, which I'm not sure what's going on with that, but it doesn't seem to be showing signs of life. But I'm assured that it will be. Um, and
And the agritourism, right?
and the agritourism, the carnival-like atmosphere at some
Yeah.
of the
Well,
farms, and
people
the
come spend the
wineries,
money.
and
You want them to
I
come
mean,
spend the money.
it's like a tour, a day tripper type of
It really is.
economy,
The North
and the
Fork is
breweries. Yeah.
very much more that, I think. Yeah.
So I mean, you know, I don't know. I think Riverhead would just be happy, especially downtown, to have people come and you know support a business base there, a commercial base, which is still you know kind of lagging behind everything. So
Well, I think we've talked about it, and we've said that, the revitalization of Main Street is only going to work if you have feet on the ground on Main Street, and whether that, we've always talked about that in terms of the apartments and the apartment buildings on Main Street. But I would guess too that if you're building that hotel economy too, those are people that are going to, walk to a restaurant or, walk to the Suffolk Theater or whatever, and help that idea of a revitalized downtown like Patchogue.
Hmm. And I mean, look at Southampton Village. Cailin, you cover Southampton Village, and the Southampton Inn recently uh, has been talking with the village about plans to expand uh, to make a little bigger footprint there. And I know Hampton Bays has a proposal for a kind of a boutique hotel at the former where the Boardy Barn used to be. It's now, I think they call it the Barn. That's a project that's moving forward as well. But um,
And we're receiving, I think, good support from the community in Hampton Bays. They
for
like
that one,
the
yeah.
they like the idea of a restaurant there. They still want somewhere to go have breakfast since the diner
Yes.
closed.
And I think the idea that you put one in there as part of a hotel might be
Yeah.
attractive. The Southampton Inn project, Cailin, has been sort of mostly the village has been mostly supportive, I think, but some people a little upset about that, right?
Well, there's a proposal to add workforce housing units there, and also staff housing, and the details of that have been kind of there's been a back and forth about how many because providing workforce housing is a huge issue in the village as well, and I think that people don't want to necessarily see a resort property encouraging the kind of, day tripper scenario you were talking about, unless it has some sort of larger benefit to the community, because the dynamics are a little different in Southampton Village. And so, because of the extreme issues with traffic, everyone's understandably sensitive about that. And it's in that western portion of the village. So, I don't think that a project like that would be a non-starter if there wasn't some sort of workforce
Workforce
housing.
housing, yes.
You'd
Got
think I
it.
would say that right by now, since I've said it enough times.
It comes up enough in our conversations.
But yeah, that's kind of the push and pull, when it comes to any kind of development, and everyone's also always kind of concerned about what it'll do with traffic. So it's a tricky dynamic there.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll just move on to another topic. I want to remind people this is Behind the Headlines on WLIW. I'm Joe Shaw. My co-host is Bill Sutton. We're with the Express News Group. Our panelists are Beth Young of the East End Beacon, Denise Civiletti of Riverhead Local, and Cailin Riley of the Express News Group. So, Beth, you said there's a big conversation taking place on the North Fork right now about a subdivision proposal. Tell us a little bit of the background there.
Yes, so this actually it was there's the Solaviv group has been buying up a lot of land on the North Fork for quite a long time. And they're a few years back, this is a big real estate conglomerate based in New York City. They own a lot of commercial property in New York City. And the son of the founder of this company did a lot of farming out west, and his name is Stefan Solaviv. He was out west for a long time, and then he settled out here and started buying up, his company started buying up properties on the North Fork and also on Shelter Island. They bought the pharmacy and the Cheekwood Inn and some other properties on Shelter Island. And just a couple of weeks, I guess back in September, they announced the pharmacy is not going to be filling prescriptions on Shelter Island anymore, which upset a lot of people because it's the only pharmacy on the island. If you have a medical emergency, now you have to get your prescriptions delivered from off the island. But
that's a growing problem, isn't it? I mean, I think
it's
Shelter Island, Hampton Bays, Montauk, we've all had pharmacies go away, and it's starting to become a problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one particular thing. I mean, I don't know that they'd run a pharmacy before, but I think the people on Shelter Island really felt betrayed by that. But now on the North Fork, they have all this farmland, and this one big swath in Cutchogue on the North Road, it's 11 lots, that's 400 acres. And they put in an application to the Southfield Town Planning Board for a subdivision that would be 47 housing lots and then a big farm preserve area. So this is the first really big signal of what their ultimate plans on the North Fork are. And they own a lot of other properties as well that I'm sure they have plans for that haven't come for formal application yet.
A ton of like farmland or fallow farmland in like Baiting Hollow and Calverton and stuff, all up and down the whole Sound Avenue.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound too egregious if it's 400 acres.
Yeah, the way they're it's a conservation subdivision.
Right?
It's a clustered conservation subdivision. They're saying they could have built 193 houses there, and they're building 47. And there's also, I guess, 200 and some odd acres. I think it's 260-ish acres are going to be. They're talking about selling development rights to the town and the county. Now that's a big purchase for the town and the county too that hasn't come down the pike yet. So, but I think the public sentiment. I mean, we got so much traffic on this, and so many people who are just were waiting to see what these developers' plans would ultimately be, and are very upset about it. So this hasn't gone to public hearing yet. They were reviewing the application for completeness in October. And it may have to go through extended secra depending on the state environmental quality review. So that might take a while. And then also there'll have to be a public hearing before the town board at the point at which they would be selling development rights. So it's a big project. It's just in its infancy now, and we'll see where it goes. And
you said it's 400 acres?
It's almost 400 acres, yeah.
And what is that property now?
It's farmland primarily.
Is it primarily farmland or is it all
It
farmland?
goes from Route 48, which is the North Road in Cutchogue, to the Long Island Sound.
Mm.
It's mostly farmland, and then when you get near the bluffs, I think it's undeveloped bluff lands. 18 of these housing lots are going to be waterfront lots. So
I
that's
imagine they're not going to be small houses.
no. So yeah, so we'll see what it's going to be. I think the way they've designed it, you probably won't see a lot of the houses from any major, scenic byway.
Is it possible they'll preserve that land along the road and make it farmland again? It's possible, right?
Yeah, it's going to be the goal is to have that be active farmland. One of the issues is because it's such a huge piece of property, and the county and the town are partnering on the development rights, they're going to have to change all the boundaries of the lots so that the town has its lots and the county has its lots that they're preserving. And one of the things the planning director in Southwold was saying is like the way they have it set up right now, it's one big farm, which, the Solovie's are used to doing one big farm. This is not a big farm for out west where they had a lot of their land in the Farm Belt before, but it's a big farm for the North Fork. One of the things the planning department is saying is, down the road, nobody has 250-acre farms on the North Fork. And so divide this into 5 farms, each with a little place where you can do on-farm processing. And that's what's going to be the sustainable future of farming on the North Fork. Because if this owner doesn't own it in perpetuity, there aren't a lot of farmers who have the resources here to farm a piece of land that big. So that's going to be a big part of the conversation as well.
Who's farming it now?
I believe Soloviv is. I don't know that it's all inactive farmland. Oh, somebody's telling me it might be sad, but
it's really interesting how development and the protection of farmland really go hand in hand these days. It's not necessarily about one or the other. The two really work in tandem.
Yeah. And this is a corridor that has been on Southold's list to preserve for quite a long time. There's a very scenic road called Oregon Road that is kind of like the north part of Cutchogue that this connects with a bunch of preserved farmland all along that stretch. So this would sort of complete the Farm Belt puzzle for Southold's land acquisition.
Well, if the development rights are being, extinguished from those farms, then it becomes affordable for farmers to come in and farm a 50-acre farm or whatever, and it's sustainable that way.
And also those development rights can be transferred now and create affordable housing by increasing the density in other areas. So, I mean, that's how the program's supposed to work, right? I mean, it's supposed to have some benefits on both ends.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens. They haven't done appraisals yet. We don't know what this purchase is going to be. I think it's probably going to be one of the largest development rights purchases in Southold.
Hey, speaking of hotels as well as development rights, what happened with the former North Fork Bank headquarters?
Okay.
Is that?
Yes. So.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. So,
no, it's good.
So Southold is updating its zoning code, and in the process of this, they put a moratorium on hotel development when the North Fork, the former North Fork Bank headquarters owners were just about to submit a new hotel application. They originally had an application for a big hotel there, and they've scaled it back significantly. And they applied for a waiver from the moratorium, and they received it about 4 or 5 months ago. I haven't seen an application yet to the planning board for this current.
Interesting.
No, they do have an application. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, so they're trying to go forward with a hotel there.
A lot of stuff going on the North Fork right now.
Yes.
Because that's just so ripe for redevelopment. I mean, it's this big, empty
that's
building.
A big part of the reason they gave a waiver. And, there are a lot of people who live here who would like to have seen it, be some kind of incubator or job, high-tech job creator or something. But, I guess there's not really the you need a tenant that wants to locate out here, and
they tried that at Gabreski, 20 years ago, and that's what the the industrial park at Kabreski was supposed to be was high tech, and
I'll
nobody
give the
was interested.
Gurmasians a call.
It's
Write that
pretty
down.
hard to compete with the value of waterfront land as
Yeah,
subdivisions at this point. That's
Yeah.
the highest return for the investment, no question. So, Cailin, let's bring you into the conversation. I want to talk a little bit about your story that you did this week on the Amistad. And we have written before about the fact that the Amistad, which we can briefly tell the story if people aren't familiar with it, but it does have pretty strong connections to the South Fork. And you wrote this week about a collaborative effort that's going on regionally that some local groups are involved with. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so most people who are familiar with the Amistad, if they are familiar with it, it's from the 1997 film by Steven Spielberg, which won some Academy Awards. And it basically, the La Amistad was a schooner that carried men and women from the Mendi tribe who were from the area of Africa now known as Sierra Leone. The ship is a schooner. It didn't come from Africa to the East Coast. The ship, the Mendi men and women, there were about a little more than 50 on board. They had already been captured in Sierra Leone and they were in Cuba. And the ship was going up the coast to take them to be sold in the slave trade. And famously, the men and women aboard the ship revolted and they gained control of the ship. And they tried to force them to sell them back to Africa. In the middle of the night, the captain and the crew that they were ordering to tell them to take them back was kind of meandering up the coast still. And eventually the ship ended up off Culloden Point in Montauk. And then the men and women on board were recaptured, taken to Connecticut. And there was a famous Supreme Court case, um, United States versus Amistad. And they won their freedom. And eventually they returned to Africa. So it was a really triumphant story. Obviously, it was, perfect for the Hollywood treatment, but there's so much more to the story. And because it's such an important part of American history, and it's really an international story as well. And there's a lot of different moving parts to this story. There was the ship coming shore in Montauk, and then these men and women were living in Farmington, Connecticut during the time that the trial was ongoing, even before it went to the Supreme Court, and then even after they won their freedom, but the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court victory actually overturned a lower court ruling, but the one part of the ruling that they did not overturn was that the federal government would have to fund their return. This is obviously in the 1800s, so it wasn't like they could just hop on a flight and go back to Africa. So here they were, they won their freedom, but they didn't really have the money to go back to Africa right away. So there were a group of abolitionists that kind of helped raise money for them to go back. So it's this really intriguing story with a lot of
so it
different
was a
parts.
couple of years right before they could go back.
Yeah, so it took some time, and in the meantime, they were here, they had to stay here. Obviously, they were subjected to, you know, not so great treatment by some people. So there's a lot to the story, and there's a lot of different organizations that are involved, including Brenda Simmons, who's the founder and president of the Southampton African American Museum. We love Brenda at the Express. She does so many amazing things, and she's so passionate about everything that she does in the community for uplifting the Black community and really sharing all the history of the area with everyone. And then Dr. Georgette Greer Key, who's the executive director of the Eastville Community Historical Society in Sag Harbor. Brenda and Georgette really work together on a lot of things, and one of the things they're very passionate about is the Amistad. They've arranged to have the replica ship, which is also functions as a museum. It's called Discovering Amistad. It's really cool if you've never seen
It
it or
really
been.
is. It was
It's
in
like a
Montauk. this
Yeah.
past summer, and we
Yes.
visited, and it is really remarkable. It's also remarkable that it's not bigger than you would expect. Like
Yes.
the size of that ship, to think about that many people living on that ship in the bowels of that ship for
Mhm.
as long as they did is really
Yeah.
stunning. But it really does drive home the history in a way that the
Yeah.
movie begins to. But yeah, to see it in real life.
Absolutely. And discovering Amistad, that they have that ship really functions as a museum, and they really tell the story of everything that happened on there. Even there's so much to that story. And so Brenda and Georgette, they created Amistad Week in Montauk. They were really instrumental in getting the New York State historical marker in Montauk. And they've been coordinating with Paula Mann Agnew, who's with Discovering Amistad. And then there's another organization that's based in Louisiana that has all of these, foundational papers and documents that were related to the court case and everything involving the abolitionist group that really helped, the Mendi people, throughout the trial and in their desire to get back to Africa. And so Brenda and Georgette earlier in October took a trip to Connecticut, and Paula with Discovering Amistad, they put together this whole itinerary where they visited a lot of different important sites in Connecticut. And they kind of what they essentially did was sort of retrace the steps of this whole narrative. Brenda was speaking about how it was very moving to be in the courthouse in Connecticut where the original case had unfolded. And even just to when they first went to the customs house there, she really marked the date. It was the August 29th of 1839. And that really connected with her because she's very familiar with the date of August 26th of 1839, which is on the historical marker in Montauk, which is when the Amistad came aground there. And so you can really feel like how 3 days later they were in Connecticut, and the markers, you're just kind of seeing that with those historical dates and retracing those steps. And so they got together, they had a lot of discussions, they shared resources. There were certain things they learned from each other, and it kind of helps piece the story together and really just solidified their collaboration. And it's really key because, in it's an important story, and these are the different groups that are dedicated to preserving this history and sharing it. And I think that, in the current political climate, when it comes to what is and isn't or can or cannot be taught in public schools, we're going to maybe see organizations like this maybe have to take up a little more of the responsibility of making sure these stories are told and these important moments in history are shared and preserved. And so I think that these kind of collaborations are really
So
key.
important.
And I just think you really commend the people that are doing this work, because there's like this added pressure or responsibility, but also at the same time so many of these organizations rely on like federal grants or funding, and
Mm.
obviously that's a difficult time for it all as well. So they're really doing some great work, and the story of the Amistad is just, it's just a really cool, compelling, and important story. So yeah,
It's
I always love
also
writing about it.
it's also a regional story, which makes it a little
Hmm.
tricky because
Yeah.
Connecticut can sort of lay claim to this because that's where a lot of the legal part of the story took place. But again, landing in Montauk is significant, and a lot of the resources. I think it's interesting that the ship itself, this replica ship, is a resource, and I think there's some question about where that ship is going to be staying. Right? I mean, they need to find a location for that ship to be home ported for the time being. And it's not on the South Fork at the moment. It's back in Connecticut, I think, right?
Yeah, it's definitely in Connecticut, but it made the visit for Amistad Week. It made a visit to Sag Harbor like in the early 2000s. So that's the thing that's kind of cool about it, because even if it has a home base somewhere, it's still a functioning ship, so it can, you can make little journeys. One of the other points I thought was interesting, which I don't know that I got into the article, but part of the reason that they wanted to even have the trial in Connecticut was because they thought it would be more favorable for the outcome they thought they were going to get, because slavery was not abolished in Connecticut until 1841,
Mm.
and it had already been abolished in New York. So
No.
they strategically tried to have it there, but the case still worked in favor of justice. And also, John Quincy Adams was the one who argued on behalf of the Mende tribesmen in the Supreme Court case. He was our second US president. So pretty cool, especially if you're just a local person and you come from the East End, to know that Montauk had a big part in this big, huge moment in our history.
It also opens a lot of people's eyes to the fact that slavery wasn't just an issue in the South, that in the Northeast, it continued for many years. And
Yeah.
that was a big part of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
great stuff. It was a really good story. And I love that the local organizations are working so closely with the folks in Connecticut and, as you said, down in Louisiana to try and pull all this effort together.
Yeah, I mean, like Brenda and Georgette, they're so dedicated to ensuring the preservation and survival of so many of these important stories, whether we're talking about Pierce Conser from Southampton Village, or, just the local stories about the history of slavery and the Great Migration in our area,
And
the Amistad.
the communities in Sag Harbor, the Black communities in Sag Harbor.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
So
So they're
important.
it's really important work that they do. And, it's not easy work to do either. So
Mm.
you have to commend them because they do a really great job, and they're doing something really important as well.
There's such a
Great to
passion
shine,
for it.
yeah, great to shine a light on it every once in a while too, and let people know what's going on.
Mhm.
No question.
For
This
sure.
is Behind the Headlines on WLIW. I'm Joe Shaw. My co-host is Bill Sutton. Our panelists this week are Beth Young of the East End Beacon, Denise Civiletti of Riverhead Local, and Cailin Riley of the Express News Group. Let's turn to Flanders. Beth, I know we wrote about it this week too, but there was an approval this week. Southampton Town signed off on a grant. Bill, I think it was what, $2.4 million?
Correct, yes.
Coming out of the new community housing fund. That's the new transfer fund that was set up. Was that last year or 2 years ago? I know they started collecting money last year, I believe.
The ballot prop was in 2022.
2022. So the money began collecting in 24, I think, or something. Anyway, they have some money to spend now on affordable housing measures, which is new. We had the Community Preservation Fund, which was a 2% transfer tax and generated a lot of money over the years, a couple of $1 billion for preservation. This is actually a smaller one and is generating money for affordable housing. So this grant was $2.4 million to what in Riverside? What is the plan there in Flanders Riverside?
Yeah, so this is not Southampton's first CHF grant. They've done a few other things with the funds to date, but this is going to be a big deal in Riverside, which Southampton Town has been looking to redevelop for a long time, and to the consternation of Riverhead across the river, particularly of late, because they initially were talking about doing 2,900 units of housing as part of this redevelopment effort. Now, this would be like the town would provide the zoning that made it possible for private developers to redevelop the neighborhood, and they needed a sewage treatment plant in order to make that happen. So the funding is in place for the sewage treatment plant. Riverhead filed a lawsuit over it. It was thrown out, but I think they're appealing. So that's still a little bit of a question mark, but the judge who threw out the lawsuit initially was kind of basically said like they don't have a case. So they were arguing that it was violating the Green Amendment to the New York State Constitution, saying everyone has a right to clean air and water. And the judge basically said the sewage treatment plant helps provide the right to clean air and water.
Yeah.
So Anyway, so
They
that's
made other arguments that the judge similarly tossed out on their ears.
yeah. So
But
we'll see how that goes
yeah,
on appeal.
So this
Anyway,
this money is to the private developer, though, right? To
yes. So this particular thing is CHF funding. That's to purchase the land. So the developer still. I mean, this project's going to cost more than $2.4 million. It's
Mhm.
I believe 40 units, a
40,
mixed.
40 units. And it's Georgica Green Ventures, which
Yeah.
is a developer who has built a lot of affordable housing on the East End and up the island a little too.
I have to say they've had very successful projects with Southampton Town in they did the Spionk Commons, right? And
Mhm.
they also did the Sandy Hollow project. And I believe they've also worked with East Hampton Town
Well,
on some
they
They
projects.
just
have.
did a very big one in East Hampton that's been very successful. I
Yeah.
think it's
So they
Point.
they have a
Yeah.
history of working with the two towns out here to create good affordable housing. And I have to say, the projects that they've done, I know Sandy Hollow, I regularly point to that as an example of how, a lot of people thought that was going to be a problematic development. It's fit in perfectly in the Tuckahoe area just outside Southampton Village. You'd never know it was there. And it's a place where a lot of local people live who are working people, and it's exactly what we need more of.
Yeah, and they're also partnering with the First Baptist Church in
Yeah.
Riverhead on the Community Life Center, which is a complex that they've been wanting to build for the longest time.
they
And
built the one on Main Street too,
right,
Georgia Green.
is that the one that had the brewery in the
Pardon me?
ground floor? I'm blanking on the name of the brewery because it changed. Is that
Yeah, that's
yeah.
the one with the brewery. And
Riverview Loft?
Riverview Lofts it's called, the building. And they also have plans to put, well, there's a plan for another rather large complex on West Main Street. That's Georgia Green. And they signed a letter of intent with the town for property next to our office on Griffin Avenue over there, in the parking lot of what used to be like the cooperative extension, and they tore that down when they built the new one, and they made a parking lot there, and now there's going to be a building there, which is going to be interesting because that parking lot is pretty heavily used. But
It's
they're
really,
active. They're very active
it's
builders.
really encouraging to see a developer come in and with a commitment to affordable housing, and, a commitment to affordable housing projects.
Yeah, this is going to be a
able to
big
move forward.
project for Riverside in general, and
Yeah,
Well,
this
it's
is gonna be one of
it's
first
the
big
first
ones, yeah.
project of the proposed redevelopment. It's going to be, I imagine, something that they're going to be able to point to, and as a first phase of that. Although it did not come without some opposition this week from neighbors who are concerned about properties next door, in which the proposed 7-Eleven is going to be built next to these three properties, and
And a gas station, right?
a gas station, 7-Eleven and a gas station, and right on the Riverside
The
traffic
circle.
circle.
Yeah.
And so these
where
neighbors
there already are, I think, at least one, maybe two.
There are two
Yeah.
gas stations,
Two,
both
yeah.
of which have mini marts
Yeah.
already
So this would be
on
a
the circle.
third one on the circle, which is,
And
but
it's on a property that had been a gas station historically that's
Right.
been in really bad shape for years.
and I
Yeah.
understand that
Yeah.
criticism by neighbors, but I also will point out that having done some traveling over the last couple of years, that's not unusual. I mean, you see clusters of development like that in a lot of places, and it is a little redundant, but I think arguably better than an open space. I mean, just a vacant space.
I mean, yeah, kind of the problem is that that's like the centerpiece of Riverside is this traffic circle.
Yeah.
It's like it's like the town square of Riverside, which is you wouldn't want to hang out there, you'd get hit by a car, but they need a focal point other than the traffic circle, and I think that's part of the frustration.
I know.
Well, he's going to build a sign to say "Welcome to Riverside."
People keep stealing that sign.
I mean, the idea was to make it a walkable community, which I always thought was kind of a farce to begin with,
Yeah, there.
because
I don't think it's going to be there, but
I mean,
the new neighborhood that they're going to
the new
develop,
thing
they're
that
going
they're
to build,
talking about doing, yeah.
that's
But
going to be
otherwise,
walkable. It'll be back a block from
Flanders
Road.
Route 24 and the traffic circle in particular are
How many
never going to be like
fatalities have there been
pedestrian
on Route
friendly.
24 just in the last 3 months? I mean,
Yeah.
you don't want that to be walkable.
So they're putting a whole bunch of new roads in. The town has a map of roads that they're going to be putting in throughout this area that hopefully will bring some street life. I mean, I think one of the big problems on Route 24 is the crosswalks don't line up with the street lighting. And a lot of people are crossing that street at night, and there's a street light like 30 feet that way, that if they were crossing under the street light, you could see people, and there's no light on the crosswalk. And
It does feel like
a guy was killed there recently.
Yeah, that area of Riverside, Flanders really needs a redesign. It feels like the development sort of outpaced any kind of planning that went into making a real healthy community right there.
Well, so that's the whole point of the redevelopment.
I mean, it's really old development too. I mean, I think it predated planning in general.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And Riverside and Flanders are two very different places.
They are.
People get like upset when people lump them together. People in Riverside and Flanders.
Yeah, and I think the Riverside project at one point, Denise, I remember it's been years ago now, but there was a proposal for a walking bridge over into downtown Riverhead from there, right? Yeah. And I don't think that ever came to pass.
The maritime park that they put in.
Yeah,
that put a bridge over the river.
Never came to pass.
No, the park is kind of there.
The park is there, yeah. I mean,
they haven't done all the access to the river yet.
No bridge.
You could see it from McDonald's.
Yes. I think the walking bridge is actually kind of an intriguing idea if it ever gets off the ground.
It was very tall.
Yes,
it was incredibly tall.
It would have to be for the boats and things underneath it, probably.
Well, maybe the aquarium will build it for us.
I don't think anyone in Riverhead wanted that bridge.
I think you're probably right.
Well, that's been the problem all along. Is there's been a real division in a division in vision. Excuse the alliteration, but the vision between Riverhead and people living in Riverhead and Riverside, Flanders, and the people living in those areas. There's just the vision, the redevelopment hasn't aligned, I think, over the years, and I think that's been an issue and unfortunate, because I think if the two towns had worked together with a single vision, then you would have had a really you would have a beautiful beautiful community.
Riverside in particular really is part of Riverhead more than Flanders. I mean, you got to cross 105 to be in Flanders, right? So, but I mean, it's really part of the same community, and I think it being in two different townships hampers it being being one cohesive community.
Absolutely.
I mean, people always refer to Riverside as Riverhead.
Right.
Sure.
It's got a Riverhead post office address.
School district.
The Riverhead School District, the Riverhead Fire Department services, a big chunk of Riverside.
Yeah, there's no question. It's basically part of Riverhead and should be that, but it isn't because of where the border is. But that would have meant we really needed more cooperation with the two towns, and instead there's been a lot more friction.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just too bad. We have a couple of minutes left. I did want to give Cailin a chance to talk about a story she did recently about something that the Group for the East End is doing, and Jen Skilbred in particular. Tell us a little bit about the story that you wrote, Cailin, because I thought it was really interesting.
Well, one of the really great things about working for a community news organization is that sometimes you get to write a story about a good friend who's doing something awesome. And this was the case for this story. So I've personally known Jen for a very long time. We're both in our zone defense era. And if you know anything about sports and children, you might know what that means. It means we're married and we have 3 kids. So we have a lot in common. And in this era, when you are married and you have 3 kids, one of the things you're constantly thinking about is, how do I get my kids to not be on a screen all the time? And that consumes a lot of your your mind and thinking about what being on screens does for them and how things were different when we were kids and how it's bad, all the things. So, anyway, for anyone who has kids and thinks about this, which is almost everyone, Jen is just a great resource because in her work as the assistant director of environmental education with the group for the East End, she does these amazing programs. They do a lot of field trips in schools, but also after school outings. And they basically take kids outside and show them the beauty of the natural world. So I got to talk to her about that. She was sharing these stories with me about just like the magical transformation she sees with kids when she takes them outside. They went on one nature walk, and she found like an old log that was laying on the ground, and they turned it over and found a salamander underneath. And then there was another trip where they came upon a clearing where there was a body of water, and they saw a beautiful bald eagle. And a lot of the times on these trips, the kids will get off the bus or they'll get there and they'll be all rambunctious and kind of all over the place. But then when they see something like that, it kind of transforms the whole vibe. They get quiet, they really start to focus, pay attention, and ask so many questions. And kids have a natural curiosity about everything. I mean, sometimes as a parent, you that's a slippery slope because you want to be like, please, please stop asking me so many questions. I'm
But why?
overstimulated. But why? But why?
Yeah.
Why?
Why?
But it is very cool that they, even kids who you can't escape the screens and all the different things, but it's really nice to know that there's something like this, that you can take your kid and they can have these kind of experiences. And I thought what was really interesting that she told me about was it's not just the experience itself is not, a one off. A lot of the time, she said with her own kids, they'll go on a walk, and this is another relatable thing. She'll say to them, we're going to go on a walk, and she said, a lot of the times it's, oh, we did that yesterday, or we've been on this trail before, Mom, I don't want to go, blah blah blah. But every time, she said, she takes them, the mood transforms. And then a lot of the time they come home and they're maybe looking up something that they saw, or they're curious about, drawing something that they witnessed. It kind of has this carryover effect.
I think
Jen,
what's amazing to me is when we were kids, when I was a kid, it was about getting away from the screen, getting away from the television screen and going outside. Now we're carrying screens around. It's got to be even more of a challenge for
yeah.
parents. Yeah,
Yeah, but this is
absolutely.
why, like, in this instance, these kids don't have their phones with them. They really are just kind of getting that opportunity to experience that. And you have to be so much more intentional about it now. Back in the day, you didn't have to be intentional about it
It
because
was just
this
it was normal when
right,
we
Yeah,
were
because this
kids.
absolutely.
whole thing didn't exist that you had to actively try to distance yourself from.
No,
So,
no,
it's
no
pretty cool.
question.
And Jen is
We're
going to be on our podcast soon. And she has a
yes,
very, I
we
mean, her and her husband have a very great story because they traveled the country for 15 months in an RV with their kids and went to a bunch of
God
national
bless
parks.
him.
So that'll
I
be
love
worth a
that.
listen.
And some nice photos with your story too, which is at 27east.com. I'll remind people. We are out of time. Thank you to Denise Civiletti, Beth Young, and Cailin Riley. Thank you to my co-host Bill Sutton. I'm Joe Shaw. We will be back next time with another edition of Behind the Headlines. Thanks, guys.